everyone to this session on partnerships and building bridges with Ylli Bajraktari. For those of you who are just tuning in, I'm Ayisha Piotti, Managing Partner of RegHorizon and Director of AI Policy at ETH Zurich Center for Law and Economics. Ylli has an impressive resume. He's currently CEO of the Special Competitive Studies Project in the United States. Prior to joining SCSP, Ylli served as the Executive Director of the US National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, where he was responsible for defining and sharing the vision of the United States on this very important topic. Ylli joined the US Department of Defense in 2010, and over the course of his illustrious career, he held various leadership roles on national security and policy issues. Ylli is also the recipient of the US Department of Defense Distinguished Civilian Service Medal. Now, as a reminder to the audience, due to the high demands on his schedule, this session will last only 30 minutes, and we won't be able to take questions directly from the audience. However, I urge you to still post your reflections and your questions in the chat, and we will do our best to share them with Ylli to follow up at a later stage. Now, Ylli's remarks will deal today with, they'll be focusing on the mission and the most latest work of the SCSP. The topic of his talk, partnerships and building bridges, is also very relevant to the core theme of our overall summit. Ylli, it is my great pleasure and honor to have you with us today. So without any further delay, I would like to pass the floor to Ylli Bajraktari.
Great to be here, Ayisha, and thank you so much for hosting me and for bringing together such a broad community with a shared commitment to building a future of responsible AI and stronger democracies. As you noted, my background is the national security. I spent most of my career as a civilian in the Department of Defense. And as you noted also, I also served as the Executive Director of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. I now lead a successor organization called the Special Competitive Studies Project. Our mission is to make recommendations to strengthen US and our allies' competitiveness for an era of AI and other emerging technologies. I say all of this because it might appear that Ayisha invited an unusual candidate to speak about partnering in AI at a gathering focused on AI governance, responsible AI, and society issues of transatlantic bridge building. But I come to your event out of necessity. These are urgent issues critical to our economy, our society, and our national security. And the implications these issues have for our alliances are tremendous. They will ultimately shape the end state of the international order that will benefit all democratic nations and the values we all believe in, including privacy, civil liberties, and free speech. But let me start first with why the United States Congress thought these issues were so important to launch an independent commission. I believe the US Congress was driven by two primary factors. First, consider the impact of these technologies on our society and our economy. McKinsey estimates that AI could add around 13 trillion, and I repeat, trillion dollars to global GDP by the end of this decade. Consider recent AI-driven advances in personalized and precision medicine, gene therapy, vaccine discovery, drug design, and cancer screening, or advances in environmental solutions like optimized crop management, reduction of plastic waste, and experiments with fusion energy. The impact of this for global societal and economic prosperity are unquestionable. Second, I believe the United States Congress created the Independent Commission because they believed that the digital wave and the next wave of tech innovation are happening right now. And undeniably, whichever nation becomes the leader in mastering AI and other emerging technologies will hold the power to set the rules of the road for our global digital life for the rest of this decade, if not longer. There's an old saying that says, whoever controls the technology controls the future. And there, China has made its plans very clear. So my role here today is to talk about the geopolitical context, the landscape we are in regarding this technology competition, and the role and importance and the goals that China has made in this space. China wants to dominate the emerging technology that will fuel industries of the future and apply them to get ahead. It is devoting enormous state resources to accomplishing its objectives. And because of its ambitions, the tech competition with China will be the defining feature of our global politics for the rest of our lives. What would a world dominated by Chinese technologies look like? We just published a report, which you can find at the scSP.ai. And in it, we have a chapter where we describe, not in a scientific way or sci-fi way, but what losing the tech competition for democracies would look like. Here's a snapshot I have for you. Imagine a world where China controls the global digital infrastructure, has the dominant position in tech platforms, controls the production of critical tech, and is harnessing biodata and new energy to transform its society and economy, and ultimately their military. If we lose in these areas, it will be hard to regain advantages. And we already are seeing the way China uses and applies technology against the minorities in Xinjiang. So the question in front of us today is, how do democratic societies stay ahead and use these technologies for the betterment of their societies while staying true to their democratic ideals? Because of the context we find ourselves in, how we govern AI within our societies and how we use AI to strengthen our economies and defenses are important elements of the competition. So Ayisha was kind enough to invite me to speak and share some of my thoughts on how we do this today. First, we need to get the AI governance model right. Getting AI governance right means designing, building, and using AI systems safely, responsibly, and ethically that is strategic in direction, and it will advance our society, it will advance our economic prosperity, and it will build our national security goals. I have come to believe that AI will offer us a moment of opportunity to make progress in several areas. I'm not a techno-utopian. I'm not naive. I've seen enough tech failures in government to know better. But time and again, almost weekly, and with shorter and shorter time between discoveries, we are seeing examples of AI breakthroughs in areas critical to our health, to our society, and our families. All of us recognize the legitimate concerns about privacy, bias, trust, reliability that flow from AI applications that are poorly designed or not well understood. Let's not forget, AI is a dual-purpose technology. We have seen that powerful AI systems that work very well can be used for bad intent. These problems are the justifiable focus of many in the audience today, and I appreciate for all the work you guys are doing. Most of us on both sides of the Atlantic and across the democratic world agree upon the basic principle of what we want AI to do and not to do. For instance, the White House's recently released AI Bill of Rights captures the spirit and endpoint with what the EU is trying to do with their AI Act. But as Europe moves out to regulate these technologies, we need to be mindful that regulation almost never has fueled a sudden jumpstart of innovation. And for many on this side of the Atlantic, it seems that European regulations are directed primarily towards American companies, while ignoring the power and reach of Chinese technology platforms. But I don't want to lose sight of the transforming opportunities presented by AI and the opportunity cost of turning against AI by making this whole AI discussion about our differences over regulation. Highlighting the different governance approaches above the fact that we have the same exact goals for our societies risk distracting from the larger partnership agenda and the rapidly changing global context in which these debates are occurring. Look at what's happening in Ukraine today. This brings me to the larger point. The reality is that the United States, its European partners, and friends elsewhere in the world have a shared interest in leading in AI and other technologies because the companies, countries, and alliances that harness AI will be positioned to reap the economic, societal, and military benefits. The changing strategic landscape that I just mentioned, the rising power and ambition of authoritarian regimes, the clear determination to harness these technologies to strengthen their control over their populations and develop powerful commercial applications that will be used for geopolitical advantage, present a common threat for all of us, all of our democratic societies. So what does that mean for us as we think about our partnerships? First, partnership includes taking a more expansive view of AI's role in the strategic competition between democracies and autocracies playing out across the globe. The competition is about the control of the core digital architecture, data flows, norms, and rules shaping order. Democracies must marshal the resources and diplomatic will to collectively build secure and resilient networks, especially 5G and its successors, cables, both terrestrial and undersea, operating systems, data centers, and the digital apps, software, and platforms that support everyday governance, commerce, and life. Concretely, this will require government-supported investment in global digital ecosystem projects, aligning on maintaining technological standards based on technical, not political criteria, and agreeing to not allow human rights abusing regimes to benefit from technologies designed and built in our societies. Diplomatically, it means that our democracies need a new DemTech alliance, as we say, that is a framework to organize ourselves, to organize the opportunities and risks we face in common from the global tech competition. We need to bring our collective comparative advantages in this competition to the table. Rather than competing against other democracies, we need to organize our closest allies and partners to make sure our values and our technology shape the future. Second, the private sector is a partner. Let me just say one thing about this unappreciated partnership. If one looks at what tech companies did and continue to do in relations to Russia's war in Ukraine, there can be little doubt that they are a partner in the contest against autocracies and provide cyber defenses, cloud services for Ukrainian data, keeping the Ukrainians connected to the web, as we see daily with Starlink, etc. They're not adversaries to democracy, and whatever decisions are made about AI governance within our democracies, we can be sure they will be partners and comply with all legal obligations. Third, strategic partnership means focusing on shared objectives and innovation. Unfortunately, because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the AI partnership must now include a strong security dimension. We need European AI companies supporting European security and mission and objectives. We need them to work with United States companies doing the same kind of work. I'm so excited about the efforts like NATO's Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, also known as DIANA, or the Joint European Disruptive Initiative led by my friend Andre, also known as JEDI. They both represent a fundamental shift that we need in the European continent. We also should spend as much time helping to cultivate the rich European ecosystem of universities, companies, people, and innovators as belaboring the risk of innovation. Let me leave you with a basic point. The strategic landscape has changed, and the balance between partnership and competition should change too. Failing behind any authoritarian state in the development of AI will be bad for our collective security, our companies, and our society. The conversation has to change. How do we protect democracy against AI-enabled disinformation campaigns? Again, AI-enabled cyber threats. How do we use AI to improve the health of our societies and our economy? How do we prove wrong the naysayers who claim that democracy is incompatible with the modern age? How much danger are we exposing democracies to when we allow our data, our intellectual property, and our know-how to flow towards authoritarian regimes that we know have an incompatible vision of how our societies and the world should be organized. The best partnerships are mutually beneficial. The strongest partnerships are rooted in shared values. The most important partnerships are those with a higher purpose. I think partnerships between the United States and our closest European allies and partners on AI, the broader tech agenda, and in the current strategic environment can meet all three criteria. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss these issues with you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks a lot, Ylli. That was really illuminating, and it's very good to actually hear a sort of slightly different point of view as well, right? We are here in Europe, we're listening a lot about the EU, we are listening a lot about the binding regulations that are currently being proposed. As you of course know, China recently has also proposed regulations, specifically in algorithms space, but also privacy. Now, and I see, of course, the importance for the US to stay competitive, right? And my question really would be, how do you perceive that these sort of developments on regulation actually, in terms of their impact on US leadership in global competition, particularly for like US companies?
Well, Ayisha, I feel, and I think the sentiment we share here at the team and the reports is that this is not just the US competition against China. As I mentioned during my remarks, I think this is a broad-based democracy's competition against authoritarian regimes. Unfortunately, what's happening in Ukraine is a first demonstration of what that looks like and how it feels, unfortunately, for the people of Ukraine. I think we need to do everything possible to avoid situations going forward in these things with China. And for us to get to a better place, I think, as I demonstrated in my remarks, we get to have ourselves get better organized. How we get ourselves organized, as I mentioned, there are several ways we can do this. I think regulation, I completely understand the European approach to how do they want to go about and regulate these technologies. I think they're very vocal about the goals and the mission. I think in their mind, and I think, I have a lot of friends in Europe that would talk daily with them. They think that regulation will really jumpstart the European innovation ecosystem. I would argue that there are no historical examples that that regulation really jump-started any kind of innovation. So I think we just have to strike the right balance between what it means to continue being the number one in the innovation space, but also have these technologies regulated, and their comfort to our laws, rules, and the values we use them. The second thing that I also mentioned is, it seems to me that most of the time, the aim of these regulations coming out of Brussels are really targeted against the United States companies. And, I understand, they live with them. They are probably seeing the impact of United States platforms on the European continent. But again, we should not turn our eyes of what China is doing by building the global digital infrastructure. They've started that with the 5G. If you look at the world global map of 5G, most of the countries are using technology built by China. In Africa alone, 70% of the 4G is already built by Huawei. So what kind of a future are we going to live in where the digital life is built on a platforms deployed and used by the Chinese government? So that's the one thing that I think sometimes goes unnoticed in the European discourse when they think about regulating these platforms. So what I've argued here is that we have so much in common. Democratic world has so much in common. So we have to get together. And I think there are several venues that these things are happening, either through the TTC, the US-EU dialogue that is happening, through Quad discussions on how we're going to regulate these kind of technologies and how do we stay ahead in innovation workplace to compete more effectively against China and Russia.
Okay, well, that's interesting. But just now coming back, since we're going back to building bridges, right? And I'm thinking about, and you talk a lot about China as well, and focusing, of course, on our, not really on our differences. But the fact of the matter is that you have, democratic societies, and you increasingly see also authoritarian societies, right? And you see a bit of a move going there, and in terms of China, I mean, and we will be talking about it later on in a few days, is of course influence China has in certain other parts of the world through investment, like potentially within different countries in Africa. So what concretely, like we would, what concretely would the US, what would be your vision in terms of how to proceed with that? And how do we build those bridges going forward?
So I think there are two questions, Ayisha. In your number one, I would say is on the report I mentioned we published in September, we argue that on three critical technologies, AI, 5G, which is really about our connectivity, and semiconductors, which really builds the hardware of these computers, we were almost about to lose our competitive edge, because what we saw is China since 2017 had an aggressive plan and investment and moved out on the implementation to get ahead in all these three pieces that I think are fundamental that we have to get right as democratic societies by 2025. And so on our side, on the American side, what you saw is we completely lack a 5G alternative to Huawei's 5G. And so what is left there for us is really in close coordination with our allies and partners. United States doesn't have a standalone 5G offer for the world, but it has a 5G offer if it gets together with Scandinavian partners, with Japanese partners. And in that way, you can create sort of like a democratic 5G alternative to what Huawei has been offering to the rest of the world for the last couple of years. On semiconductors, for example, United States would have not been ahead if it wasn't for the TSMC, so our relationship with Taiwan, and ASML in the Netherlands. United States would have not been, as I mentioned, producing the cutting edge chips if it wasn't these alliances and these partnerships we have. And so to your second questions about the bridges, we need to find a new model to bring public and private sector together. I think what we have seen in the United States is during the Cold War, government was in charge of all the innovation. You had all the government labs coming out with all these incredible innovation, the internet, series of the world. You had DARPA really on the Department of Defense side, really leading every major effort for all the things that now we enjoy in our digital life. After the Cold War, the government stopped investing in basic R&D. And so what happened is the private sector took over, they continue investing, they continue building innovation ecosystem. And what you have from almost 1999 to 2017 is really the innovation and all the latest and greatest moving to the private sector. And so I argue that in the 2020s, in this decade, we have to find a bridge, as you call it, to bring these communities together. There will be instances in which our government has to step in and provide the initial funding and accept the risk. When you think about it, the United States government accepted the risk of the COVID vaccine. There were 6 different vaccines with 6 different platforms that the United States government went all in and invested. Only 2 proved to be highly successful. So going forward, and now you also see the CHIPS Act, United States government, United States Congress saw that if they don't step in and provide the necessary funding, we will not be able to produce these chips that are so ultimately important for how we build these AI platforms going forward. So I believe in this decade, we have to find this bridge in which the public sector and the private sector get together more often, share like the priority areas in which the government has to step in, and then private sector can also help with providing, horizon scanning. Private sector is really good about understanding what is the next wave of technologies that we have to stay ahead as democratic countries. If you read our report from September, we already provide like a couple of areas in which from 2025 to 2030, we need to stay ahead. Biotech, next generation computing, and next generation connectivity. These are all necessary platforms that we have to have in place, that by this end of this decade, we can ensure that the democratic world is really staying ahead when it comes to, in this technology competition.
So I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I just like, so I like the focus on foresight. I mean, just a comment on that, a side comment is that's something I think Switzerland is definitely also going towards. We have launched not very long ago a very big initiative called Gesta, where we really are in fact doing that. Where is the technology going in different fields, and how can we prepare ourselves today with regards to governance to ensure that we have the right frameworks? But just before last words, so I hear the emphasis on the need to remain competitive. Of course, we have to ensure that the democratic values are the ones that are going forward. Private-public partnership. Are we to think that in terms of and just recently we saw also the Bill of Rights. You talked about it; it came out, but there was of course some comments also about the fact that it doesn't really have much teeth in it. Does that mean a little bit that the US is more sort of, stepping back from kind of, whilst you have the partnership with the EU, but taking really a slightly different approach, understanding that we have all these other issues that are probably maybe a little bit more important? What would be your view, your personal view even on that?
Yeah. And so, Ayisha, my general view about how we go about solving this puzzle is, first of all, I think we have to decide on what our vision is. What is the vision of how we're going to use these technologies? I think, and that we already know. The vision is that we will use these technologies based on our laws, based on our rule of law, that our citizens will have the right to, complain and take these, technologies and platforms to court. Then the second part of this vision is how do we complement each other? And I spoke a little bit about how we complement each other on the 5G, on the semiconductors. I think European has incredible ecosystem, the universities, the people. I think, there are areas in which Europeans will always be ahead, and there are areas in which United States will be ahead, but how we complement each other, I think that was one of our strongest suit during the Cold War. The third piece is what you alluded is the regulation. And I think here, we will defer because Europeans have a different approach to regulation because of the political system you guys have. Most of the European countries have parliamentary system. In United States, because of the federalist, way of government, we will have completely different way how we regulate this. You see this happening at the state level. You're aware with the California laws. Yes. You're aware of a couple of efforts on the U.S. Congress on regulating these platforms. And then lately, you also saw the efforts by the administration, be that with the AI Bill of Rights or the other efforts that are currently underway. So the regulation model will be completely different, I think, between United States, Europe, Japan, probably Korea, because of the political system we live in. But I think, things are not being ignored. I think there's a lot of movement in this space. I think technology is moving fast, and that's why I would argue, we need to be up to date, and the way we stay up to date is that you need these kind of public-private partnerships because you can regulate something, but in 6 months they will become really obsolete because of how fast these technologies are moving. Civil society plays a critical role both in Europe and United States, and they are very vocal in our system. They play an incredible role in how highlighting the disadvantages of these technologies. So I think this is not going to happen overnight. This is going to be a process in our system because of the separation of government. It's much more complicated probably than Europe. But I think I'm an optimist by nature. I believe that we will get to the right place in consultation with our allies and partners. I think we have always done it in that way. And this is no also exception to the rule.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I know you've got to run, and we have really appreciated this input. I really hope that, so thank you so much for that. And we hope that for the next round, we'll see you in person. So thanks
you,
a
Ayisha.
lot, Ylli. It was a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you, Ayisha. Best of luck for the rest of the conference.
All the best.